What is up, guys? Welcome on back to the news with TK. And you know things are not going good in China when they start hiding information or just not giving it to investors. Wall Street's a little shook right now as, unemployment numbers, real estate numbers, stuff that is normally provided by the Chinese Communist Party is not being provided and no answers are given. This usually only happens when the Chinese economy is doing exceptionally bad. Roll the intro. So welcome on back to the news with TK. So Maria Bartiromo had on one of her Chinese experts this morning, and we'll get into that here in a minute. But it looks exceptionally more and more bad for China when it comes to this trade dispute with the United States, as the EU has also put out some signals that if China was, thinking it was just going to dump all of those cheap products into Europe, the EU is like, not going to happen, and they're going to raise tariffs. China is trying to find ways around the tariffs, and that's by dealing with an idealistically similar country like Vietnam. But the cost to move a lot of stuff via land and or ship it to Vietnam first, offload it, load it back on from Vietnam, and then bring it into the U.S. It's just not economically feasible. It's just as bad as just paying the 145% tariff. Now, the Trump administration, Secretary Bessent did say that there has been significant progress, which you'll see here in this clip. And without further ado, let's just roll it.
Welcome back. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent with breaking news to investors yesterday here from the Milken Conference, saying that substantial progress on China trade talks could come in the coming few weeks. President Trump says he will not bring down tariffs to get China to the negotiating table, but notes that Beijing is going to have to make a deal because they need the U.S. consumer. A new report from the Wall Street Journal shows data needed to analyze China's economy is vanishing. Chinese officials no longer publishing data points like unemployment and land sales and foreign investments. Joining me now here at the Milken Institute, International Chairman, Senior Fellow and Advisor, Curtis Chin. Curtis, you just made the point, you don't hide data when it's good data.
Absolutely. It's really par for the course. It's not just this year, but in prior years, when things look bad, the data was not forthcoming, which makes this is all about investors here. I mean, it makes it tough for investors, and we're probably going to see less and less, again, foreign direct investment into China.
By the way, the data that we did see last week was painful. Manufacturing was down, exports were down. So the tariffs that President Trump has begun to institute are working, apparently.
Well, I think, we have to find what do we mean by working? And, in terms of, is, of course, the consequence on the people there. But the reality, indeed, across the world, President Trump is driving the agenda. And with your for or against tariffs, you cannot deny that it's led to discussions that hopefully will be the benefit, not just for Americans, but for other countries, and making sure it's a sustainable trading relationship between the U.S. and them.
So based on what you know today, knowing that you've got a lack of data, how would you assess the Chinese economy?
Not well. I think that's the bottom line. We're seeing reports before the data vanished.
Right.
Again, about job losses. China is all about stability. And so that government needs to think through, what do they do? When products are not being purchased, when there's no jobs for the people. China has protests. Sometimes we don't hear about them so much. And what they worry about most are protests from workers, not students. But it's about workers.
The last thing Xi Jinping wants to see are thousands of people in the streets like Tiananmen Square.
Well, I think probably no one wants, violence and protests. But clearly, I would hope that Xi Jinping, as the rest of the world, really wants a better life for Chinese people, too. Really, the Chinese are often the victims when things like this happen and things disappear.
So how does that happen? I mean, there's this massive gap, right? The wealth gap.
Yeah, clearly in China, not just in China, in many parts of Asia, there's growing inequality. Clearly China needs to rebalance its economy. They've talked many years about increasing domestic consumption, and so that things aren't just driven by real estate, by exports. The fear now, I'm based with Milken in Asia, and the fear now often in large parts of Asia isn't so much just the direct consequences of tariffs, but the indirect impacts if that leads to China flooding the market with inexpensive goods that might have otherwise gone to the United States or Europe.
Right, and President Trump is well aware of that.
Absolutely.
By the way, now the president is set to go to the Middle East next week. He's visiting Saudi Arabia. He's going to Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. You are just back from Saudi Arabia, right? You also have an op-ed for Fortune. You're questioning whether or not Saudi Arabia is the next China or India. Tell me about your trip and what you're expecting from President Trump in the Mideast.
Sure. I mean, I'd say what a blessing that I was able to go to Saudi Arabia, encourage people to go to. The Saudis have a significant presence here at Milken Institute, not just this year and prior years. Clearly, if I were to sum it up with a headline, this is a kingdom on the move. And so blessed to be there, had the chance to do everything from try out their new subway system, really the longest, almost robot-driven subway system in the world, but also a chance to meet everyday people. And again, I had some preconceptions, some, I guess, reinforced, some clearly have changed now that I've been there. And so on Fortune, I and a co-author posed that question. Is Saudi Arabia the next China or India, this Asian nations that really going to power the world and power imaginations? In reality, the answer is somewhat no. It's a country, it's a kingdom of 33 million people. But in another way, the answer is yes, this is a nation with the ambition of a China or an India. And how great that the United States and Saudi Arabia have this partnership, as demonstrated by President Trump's upcoming visit to the kingdom.
Well, I was there about, I don't know, it's got to be almost 10 years now, and I was able to interview His Highness on stage, the Crown Prince. And at that time, he was telling me, well, we're opening movie theaters, we're allowing women to drive. Have you seen any of that actually materialize?
Absolutely. Saw women driving. Many women, many of the women are still wearing the very traditional dress. It's all about...
And they're driving with that.
I don't know about that, but clearly women are driving. Where I stayed, I went to the shopping mall, saw the movie theater, didn't go to a movie, but very clearly the pace of change is intensifying. The Saudi Arabia of today is certainly not the Saudi Arabia of 10 years ago. It's a kingdom that's opening up for more and more trade and investment. I was blessed even here in these first 36 hours of the Milken Institute Global Conference to attend a dinner hosted by Saudi Arabia, and so hear firsthand their message about a nation, a kingdom on the move and the investment opportunities.
Well, I hope so.
And they're moving
I would
forward,
like to see that.
not just through investment, but by being a center also of diplomacy. When I was there last, it was the foreign minister of Russia and Secretary Rubio were there. And now this upcoming big meeting again shows that Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, can be the hub of diplomacy and moving that region forward also.
So, what do you guys think? Personally, I thought the one clip that they did talk in there about is Saudi Arabia the next China or India? I don't think so. I mean, I know that Saudi Arabia does import a ton of labor. So does the United Arab Emirates. I just don't see. I don't see your next iPhone being built in Saudi Arabia. I do agree with the diplomacy part, though. There is a lot of diplomacy that goes down in Saudi Arabia, so that part seems more likely. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. How long do you think China is going to be able to hold out? I think as they keep closing factories and millions of workers are getting laid off, this is going to look bad for the Chinese Communist Party. Even if they are not even able to save face, I mean, spin it however you want. Like, say that you won. I don't care. But if they don't get a deal done here soon, it's going to look bad for China in another month. Like I said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's discuss this in the comments below. Give the video a big thumbs up if you like what I do. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And as always, stay petty, my friends.